Okay, so quickly. This is part one of something 5 years ago I was going to do this, but then I decided no. Then it came to me gradually. There is no point. Now, I only have one regret in life, which is all day I move around. All day. If I had a TV production team like Jonathan Pye, I would have them following me around. That's who I am for over a decade. Right. Being a 75% Corbynista, even Jeremy Corbyn saw through the complete and utter intellectual paucity of one of his first announced policies to have separate carriages for men and women on the London Underground. This is the exact opposite of how to cause people to be civilised. Of course, I learned that in my comprehensive school age, about 15, when I was stalked by a fat ginger called Kerry. And she did. It was funny. And after about 3 or 4 months of this, I actually let rip at her and got rude. And then all the women of my class gradually attacked me. Rightly. Don't be rude to her. How nasty of you to and I was a pretty shy. Oh, for God's sake. Right, I have to go. It's a beautiful place. Right. Yeah. You learn, you become civilized within mixed groups. Hey, there's a little bit of a price to pay, but it generally works out okay. Now, of course, the block button I've only ever blocked one person. I don't know how it works, but without a doubt, of 3 or 4 developments this century, the block button is the worst of all. Curating, controlling. Actually, before the block button, caller ID, also the worst of all. I'm going to call somebody this morning. Interesting. That's going to be interesting. Anyway, forget the last few years. You see, Jonathan Pye just represents a whole section of society. The words matter because most words have been co-opted. Egalitarian green. Old-fashioned green politics was quite simply a balanced, inclusive society, but those aren't just words. They actually have to be put into action. They have to be lived. They have to be embodied entirely, continually. Unfortunately, anybody under about 50 doesn't actually know what these words mean anymore, and they were actually fine. But let's just get to the point. Corbyn. So, egalitarianism. Now, I only have one thing in my life, which I probably am not dependent on, but I haven't quite had the total poised, quiet place to try it out yet. So, 2014, I had a kind of 3 or 4 normal pathogens, a mixture of bacteria, virus. Now, the body is 90% non-human DNA. Let's be crystal clear about that. We are a symbiosis, which is the perfect metaphor for how society should be. Anyway, after a few months, I had definitely one of the bugs was really, really ascendant and lived behind my nose in the cavities back there. It could be seen. About the only time the National Health Service did anything half sane, and probably set off what is called dramatically just a bloody bit of your stomach isn't quite performing properly, a hiatus hernia, which then, let's avoid that word, that phrase, actually forget it, that then seems to cause a bit of reflux, or it just gets uncomfortable in my stomach. Now, so these things, 15 milligrams, Lansazaparole, or whatever they're called. Now, side effects. So I literally take one. If I found that if I take one about every 4 days of 15, which is virtually nothing. Now, your fucking awful journalists of the BBC and the like, of course, can't do the just straightforward journalism of, I would be able to, so a box of those 30, and this is the only thing in my, I'd actually hate to admit that I use a product. This is the only product in my life I use. So if I would order 3 boxes. I'd send an email in, and they usually lose them, of course, but occasionally when the email got through, I mean, that's how pathetic the NHS are. The people, not the institution, the people. So yeah, can I have 3 boxes, please? And that would literally last over 6 months. In your pandemic. Now that's 3 boxes on one. If you get working tax credit and fall below the means tested, something like £500 a month profit, then you get them for free. Fine. Good. Okay. We're not in America, thank you. Now, in the pandemic, oh no, you could no longer get 3 boxes, only 1 box. Now, apart from being a negative in terms of with the hysteria of, well, we don't want people coming down and spreading bugs. I mean, those who have to pay £10 a prescription, I mean, essentially the prices were trebled. But no fucking BBC journalist can manage to just find out simple, real things that's changed. The cost of living crisis. Anyway, you're Jonathan Pies moaning. I don't do that because I know it's wrong. It was crystal clear 7 or 8 years ago. I lived in a hamlet of I don't want to be too specific, of a range of people who, most of them actually had a good deal more money than me, and quite a few of them, several were, and this is anywhere, this is universal, totally universal. I do not want to be specific. I'd seen this before elsewhere. But people who can afford to keep cars on the road, people who can walk up and down a mile-long road, they were entitled. As soon as the smallest thing happened in life, wrong, a fucking splinter, they're rushing to the doctor. But much more important, actually, they're entitled. People who can walk to a surgery a couple of miles away, and that's going to make you healthy. Oh no, they're entitled to have their medications delivered. Now, Corbyn needed to do a speech when he came to power, because I don't think Corbyn was completely and utterly lost. All the rest are. I think people, before you complain about cuts, reductions, whatever, the 1% getting 1%ier, before you do that, look at your own behaviour. Even me, my parents were middle class in an area of almost entirely sort of lower middle class. In fact, they would consider, as all these fucking people do, the yoga mat, the Bieber brigade. Oh, we're upper middle class. Now, anyway, they essentially lost their money, and I backed out of their world aged about 13. So I'm certainly not privileged. In fact, compared to today's middle class, I kind of almost had a lower middle class upbringing. Okay, for a few years it was a bit like spoilt. I got a car with an I on the end for my 21st birthday, but it was second hand. And then the gay man. Yeah, you see, the whole thing about the gay, even in my fucking dinosaur community of Wales, North Wales. I wasn't born there, I'm not Welsh. In our school, the most dinosaur comprehensive you can imagine, The head boy was the campest person in the whole school by far ever. Now, he was an efficient administrator. Everybody knew he was a kind of teacher's pet, but he was so openly camp. And then he joined the Navy after getting his degree, paid for by the government, but let's not bother with that. You know, the notion that gay people have been bullied is just, I'm sorry, it's like Stuart Brown was the head boy, the most backwards fascist headmaster in the world we called Porky. He really was hilarious. You know, Welsh, Baptist, Methodist, or whatever, the Bible bashing. I mean, he literally was out of central casting for the ultimate bigot. I repeat, the most openly camp person I ever have known was, quite rightly, elected head boy. You know, this is all made up, this modern thing. Anyway, this victim politics, etc., etc. Nobody should be interested in that. And I'm going to write essays about that. But they should be interested in the following, which is, yeah, Corbyn should have made a speech saying, if you want your National Health Service to continue, see, even I knew, age 17, 18, I've done this speech many times with people, and people get it face to face, but they should have done the speech he should have done the speech. Even I knew, with some sort of trauma, childhood trauma, the Katarina's bottle flying across was her, bottle. In my life, it was a baked bean can. But terrible family screaming for years. My family was known as the family that did that. I'm lucky I got over it. I wouldn't have a second different. But I knew, you knew, your bodily justice knew. Don't go to the doctor, aged 18, 21, 25, 30, even as a person who'd become selfish, atomized, ultimate London-based, selfish, atomized person. I knew you don't go to the doctor unless you're really, really ill, because you're using somebody else's slot that might be a matter of life and death. Nobody knows that anymore. And Corbyn needed to tell them that, and he also needed to tell them, stop fucking going for a pill or a nurse to take out each splinter. This is just too much. If you, not Big Pharma, privatised aspects of the NHS, don't blame them, blame yourself. Look at your own behaviour first. And that's why the Jonathan Pyeism of society, I mean, I watch these videos, they're amusing, but they're all wrong. Stop blaming the system, the institutions. It's not this horrible neo-conservative kind of message, Ayn Randian message. I don't believe in the Ayn Randian message of everybody needs to look after themselves and their society is wrong, because that's absurd. That is, in fact, that is the most infantile message of all, because the way the world is and has been since the industrialization of warfare over 100 years ago, is that we cannot be fully, we do not have purchase upon all of our existence, and that existence, international market prices for whatever, wheat, copper, soap, anything, fertilizer, they're out of our control. So there has to be, life is only, existence is only that negotiating a balance between what is beyond one's control, which does require then state rebalancing, safety net, however you want to put it. And of course, there are plenty of people. I mean, the ultimate rabbit hole is Britain is, along with America, perhaps actually more than America, this ultimately atomized society. There is no looking after each other, really. Okay, of course, there are some family units that manage to survive the atomization, the bombardization, the turbo-capitalistization, whatever these fucking Edward de Bono types come up with next. There are some families that function healthily, psychologically healthily, mutually support as a unit to some extent over long periods of time. But the majority do not, as I saw in that Hamlet, as I've seen time and time again. And Corbyn needed to be making that speech. This is the great tragedy, and I think he actually had it in him. I think he probably knew what he needed to say, but politically he didn't think he would be listened to or understood. And that's all that's happened in Britain. And you see your Jonathan Pyes. Sorry, I know something. Now, I actually haven't spent a night in hospital for many years, but no, I've only spent one night in the hospital, actually two. I was about 23. But I take note of society, I listen. I've been to a hospital a couple of times to see other people. The noise is so disgusting because the fucking nurses and fucking cleaners and fucking doctors, and I know nurses who are 30-year long-time drug users and they hide it. It's astonishing. They don't actually have to have drug tests. Their behaviour, nobody else. The efficiency of this body requires it, for it to repair itself, it needs to have all stresses reduced if possible. One of those stresses is, well, let's turn it around. Good sleep is part of that repair mechanism. And so if you have noise stress coming in, you do not get good sleep. That's my one emergency item. I care about more than anything. If I fell down a cliff and broke my femur or whatever, I'd want a pair of these with me. Earplugs. Now, okay, you can twist up toilet paper, lick it and jab it in. But your Jonathan Pyes, before they before they theatricalise, and you see even the BBC has hired Jonathan Pye in, I notice. Before you theatricalise the Boris Johnson or whoever, actually point the blood, and with his confected rage that, why don't I want to be Jonathan Pye? Because I know that I'm afraid to say 99.9% of the populace are so stupid they actually go along with his message. Now it's funny and skillful as a performance, but it's not of any use. The only thing that is of use to people is to be upfront with people. 10% of hospital beds could be freed up if the nurses and the doctors shut up and be careful of making too much noise. No. I mean, that's like the real version of society. But your Jonathan Pyes can't. Actually, I don't think they can think like that. No, they can't think like that. That's the problem. So they perform something. I mean, it's never a word I'm that easy with. Nemesis. Susie, she's not really a nemesis. I hardly have anything to do with her. But despite being one of the worst people ever in terms of her actual actions and behaviour, gave the greatest wisdom ever. She ping-ponged into a conversation. Gurdjieff said, I mean, it's following gurus like Gurdjieff, which is the problem, but make your own, become your own guru. Find a guruing for now, not, I mean, workshop, harking back to something dead, finished. But Gurdjieff said something to the effect that so in a vacuum, when people have nothing to say, they just talk even more to fill the space for self-regard. I would start to write that in my blog 13 years ago. But anyway, is that why I turned the camera on? Yeah, part one. But I wish that speech could have been this speech. Me bouncing around on the beach, which is what I've been doing. Action station. I'm going to redo this. You see, I've had that speech in my head for a long, long time, and it needs to be bouncier. It needs to be more Jonathan Pie, but just laughing at Jonathan Pie somehow. In fact, it probably even needs a TV screen of Jonathan Pie in the background with his rage, which I'm afraid has polluted 99.9% of people. Anyway, to the point. Yeah, and that's what community is. Community is, I've gone off on something and I haven't got the end of this point in my head. Community is, nobody's ever asked me. I mean, it was known for 3 years that I was really physically done in. It was actually known, but nobody's ever asked me, oh, can you manage to get any medication? Yeah, we have no fucking community, we have no society. And I spent 1.5 years putting up with somebody, his moans regarding an illness, but yeah, I just know most people are lost. Right. Most important thing of all, I only turn the camera on to waste my time whilst I'm waiting for that to rinse, for the soap to permeate and clean. I really need to make a one hour really good film. And guess what? I'm going to. I'm liberated. Thank you, certain person. This has always been in there. I mean, old man Ralph would have stood there and said, yeah, all these people, they get, even my tragic last partner, she got a hawthorn in her finger, and she was so rural, rustic. She got a hawthorn in her finger. And like within 2 days, the body is designed, it's just that the finger swells up. It's a bit painful, sure. The finger swells up, it's dealing with any infection, and then 3 or 4 days later, it pushes it out. No, we had to drive, we had to lose, well, it's not lose an afternoon's work, that's not how I think, but no, in the final analysis, unless she'd been to A&E to go and get somebody to say, just leave it, the body will push it out, that's what it's all become everywhere. I should show something that I took a photograph of this morning, but I'm not going to. What was I going to say? Yeah, there's one fundamental hook. It's left me. You see, that's what politics is. Politics, the English are the most pathetic people in the world. You have 2 versions of politics, really. I suppose you have this sort of South American version, which in the 70s and 80s we were very aware of through good film, good poetry, good books, that you have crazed, cruel fascists lurking everywhere. So that is one aspect of politics. But the British with their, I don't get involved in politics. Well, they moan all the time about their NHS. They moan all the time about their bodies. That is just as much political as the South Americans having to save their lives. There we go.